For one thing, this is a date that makes Wall Street shudder.
Will hold their third summit meeting in Washington, D.C. on Monday, the 7th of December. It is now firm. And the President and Mr. Gorbachev will sign the first arms control agreement between the U.S. and the Soviet Union in more than 8 years. To many people in many countries, it is a very significant occasion, but it will not be the visit to the United States that had originally been envisioned. It will be all business. We begin at the White House with Sam Donaldson.
At last, flanked by Secretary of State Schultz and Soviet Foreign Minister Shevardnadze, a beaming President Reagan was able to announce the long-sought but maddeningly hard-to-get Washington Superpower Summit.
Mr. Shevardnadze presented a letter to me from General Secretary Gorbachev, who has accepted my invitation to come to Washington for a summit beginning on December 7th.
Just why Soviet leader Gorbachev had done a flip-flop from last Friday, when he seemed to rule out a summit anytime soon, isn't clear. Some reports from Moscow say Gorbachev found himself under fire in the Central Committee last week, which caused him to hold back while he assessed the threat. In any event, the December summit will not be a full-scale visit the ranch extravaganza. Just 2 or 3 days in Washington to sign the new INF treaty eliminating medium and short-range ballistic missiles. Although the President acknowledged today that the all-important verification section of the treaty still isn't completely wrapped up.
No, I don't think we can say that.
It's not done, but if it doesn't get done, Mr. Shevardnadze and I are going to get kicked in the rear end very hard by our leaders.
Yes.
Where there is such a will, there will almost certainly be a way. But in the Senate, which must ratify the new treaty, the initial reaction was one of caution.
I think it's a step in the right direction, but I think it should be viewed with some healthy skepticism.
I believe it's very important that if we are not through with the agreement in Geneva, if we have not nailed down the verification, if we're not confident of the verification, that we slide the summit.
The President expressed no such reservation as he looked forward to meeting Gorbachev on the 46th anniversary of the day the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be wonderful if Pearl Harbor Day would become superseded by the day that we began the path to peace and safety in the world through disarmament.
Today's communique not only announced the Washington summit, it looked forward to a Moscow summit next year, assuming a long-range ballistic missile treaty is ready for signing. But for now, White House officials are very pleased at what has been accomplished, believing that a meeting with Gorbachev on Pearl Harbor Day is just the lift President Reagan needs to get out of the political doldrums. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, the White House.
This is John McWethy. The first Soviet reaction to all this came as Shevardnadze left the State Department this evening. He was glowing.
I think that both you and we are satisfied with these results of the negotiations.
Later, Secretary Schultz said, despite some concerns here in the U.S., he has no doubts that when an INF treaty is completed, it will be ratified by the Senate.
But the thing made so much sense that in the end, everybody's going to be in favor of this agreement.
The INF treaty would eliminate an entire class of medium-range missiles from U.S. and Soviet arsenals, some 350 Pershing and ground-launched cruise missiles for the U.S. and at least 5 times that many for the Soviets. It would be the first time the superpowers have agreed to actually throw away modern nuclear missiles, and the first time they have allowed on-site inspection or verification in each other's countries. There are still unresolved details on verification, however, still in question. Which facilities can be inspected, how quickly inspection teams must be allowed to get to suspect sites, and how frequently such inspections will be allowed. After the INF treaty, the next goal is to reduce long-range nuclear missiles, the so-called START negotiations. They have a long way to go here. Still, both sides have now committed themselves to cutting their strategic arsenals in half. And both sides, after today's meeting, say they want to sign a treaty to make that happen sometime next spring in Moscow. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
And still on the subject of the summit, a few minutes ago, we talked to Robert Legvold, the director of the Harriman Institute for Advanced Study of the Soviet Union at Columbia University. Professor Legvold, you study the Soviets. What do you notice most about today's announcement?
2 things. First, that we're not talking only about one summit, but in fact 2. It appears that both General Secretary Gorbachev and President Reagan will commit themselves to a second summit in Moscow next year. And secondly, the summit that's upon us in December is going to be a scaled-down version of what I think they had originally planned. I believe that's because Gorbachev is a little nervous about the summit, not entirely satisfied with what he sees as the likely course of the summit.
Can you explain that one just a little more?
I believe that Gorbachev was eager to have a summit where he could expect some kind of progress on SDI and some advance on the central issues of nuclear arms control. I think he's probably convinced that the president does not mean to offer him any concessions on that front, and therefore he's not going to give the president the lengthier, more involved summit that the administration would like to have.
Bob Legbold from the Harriman Institute. Later in this broadcast, the President's Supreme Court nominee, Douglas Ginsburg, visits the Senate. The modern marathon star Frank Shorter beginning all over again. And our person of the week.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Citicorp.
You can see the dream of success in the eyes of people all across America. At Citicorp, we understand the dream. That's why, as Citicorp and Citibank, we've become America's largest financial services organization, already helping 1 in every 5 American families, with more home mortgages, more student loans, more MasterCard and Visa cards than any other company. We'd like you to get to know us better. Citicorp, because Americans want to succeed, not just survive.
If you get painful headaches, you should know that recently, people like you nationwide took part in the largest headache test ever. Extra-strength Tylenol against ibuprofen. Conclusion? Extra-strength Tylenol is unbeatable for headache relief. Nothing is more effective. And something else. Tylenol doesn't irritate your stomach the way ibuprofen can. If nothing is more effective for headaches, and Tylenol is gentler to your stomach, shouldn't your choice be Tylenol?
And now Judge Ginsburg for the Supreme Court. From the East Room of the White House yesterday to the halls of Capitol Hill today. Judge Douglas Ginsburg knows that he cannot have a seat on the High Court until he is confirmed by the U.S. Senate. ABC's Britt Hume is on Capitol Hill tonight.
With Presidential Chief of Staff Baker at his side, Judge Ginsburg was engaged today in the time-honored confirmation ritual of courtesy calls on senators. He stopped in first on Alabama Democrat Heflin, who cast a pivotal committee vote against Judge Bork. He also called on Pennsylvania Republican Specter, whose vote against Bork may have been even more pivotal. And as he was meeting Judiciary Chairman Biden, he was asked how he likes all the media attention.
Well, certainly a new experience, and I hope one that won't last for terribly long.
Later, in a meeting with top Republicans, Baker was asked about reports Ginsburg had been chosen over Baker's objections.
There's no battle. It's the president's choice, and it was a unanimous choice.
Baker is in bad odor with conservative interest groups for his mild approach to the Bork confirmation, which they think let the opponents get the drop. They are gearing up this time for an all-out campaign to include mailings and broadcast ads, techniques the anti-Bork forces used effectively last time.
We're ready. We've been through it now. We're probably 3 weeks ahead of where we were on the Bork fight.
The groups that worked against Bork, meanwhile, were busy combing the much smaller written record compiled by Ginsburg, most of them, at least officially, undecided whether to oppose Ginsburg or not. And on the Senate floor, appeals from key Judiciary Committee members, Specter, Heflin, DeConcini, and Majority Leader Byrd for senators to keep an open mind, though some, including Byrd, said they are favorably disposed.
I don't know how I'll vote on the nomination. Probably vote for Judge Ginsburg.
There's nothing final about that, of course, and given Judge Ginsburg's limited record, the American Bar Association's assessment of him is likely to have more impact than it has ever had before. Britt Hume, ABC News on Capitol Hill.
In tonight's Money Matters, the government's index of leading economic indicators, which is
previous nominee Robert Bork could not get. NBC's law correspondent Carl Stern has been talking to various senators. He reports that Ginsburg's nomination may not be quick or even certain.
As Judge Ginsburg made his courtesy calls in the Senate this morning, he voiced the hope for speedy action.
Well, it's certainly a new experience, and I hope one that...
Centering on Ginsburg's service 2 years ago in the Reagan administration's Office of Management and Budget. In a case involving poisonous chemicals, a federal judge found that Ginsburg's office had acted in a highly irresponsible way in foot-dragging on regulations and allegedly watering them down to favor industry. The Ginsburg nomination could be a replay of the situation 18 years ago when appeals court judge G. Harold Carswell was named hurriedly by Richard Nixon and with insufficient investigation after Clement Haynsworth was defeated. Even his best friends say Ginsburg may not be confirmed.
I think there's a substantial likelihood that he will not. There's a substantial likelihood that the Ginsburg nomination will be a reprise of the Carswell following the Haynsworth nomination in 1969.
The American Bar Association committee, which rates nominees, received Ginsburg's name along with others last Tuesday and is known to be concerned about his age and inexperience. Yesterday's announcement was watched by pro-abortion groups. They are investigating whether Ginsburg made any promises to help eliminate a woman's right to abortion.
We need to be assured that Judge Ginsburg did not make any assurances to the Justice Department that he would overturn Roe versus Wade.